Hello, everybody. Gran Turismo 7 update 1.55 was just released, and we've all had a chance to check out the new cars in the update. It's pretty interesting selection this time, and I think interesting is to say the least. A lot of people have a lot of different opinions on this, and yeah, it's an odd one. So I'm excited to talk about this. Chaz, I think we'll start with you. We've got the F3500A, the Gran Turismo F3500A, which is a old F1 car.
Mm-hmm.
And you've made a video on our channel driving this thing. So I'm going to go to you first on now that you have some time to think about it. What do you think?
It's pure nostalgia. It's a fantastic, fantastic race car. I think it's the best looking era of Formula One as well, the very early 90s. And, I didn't particularly grow up with it. As I said in the video, I was born in 1992, which was pretty much the year that model is based around. And, I didn't quite grow up with that particular era, but I still have such an attachment to it, because I used to watch VHSs of it when I was a kid, listening to Murray Walker commentate on it. And it's just such a bulky and simple looking racing car. It's quite tall, it's quite wide at the same time, but there's bits of it that are fragile. I love the way it looks. And on that note, I think that Polyphony have done a great job with the liveries as well. There's a few different colours and different numbers that you can choose from, but I think that they all embody a little hint here and there at different colour schemes from the past. My favourite one was the number 13, which is the last one in the list. It looks like one of the old Advan liveries, the black and red fades that used to race in a lot of the JGTC championships, things like that. It's quite an interesting collaboration that I don't think anybody knew that we needed, that sort of livery on a Formula One car. But yeah, it's mega. Stupid fast in a straight line, makes a great noise. And one thing I picked up from it is that even though it's not turbocharged, the fact that it's naturally aspirated, obviously it kicks you in the back and it just fires you down the straight. You still get a bit of that sort of turbo lag effect because of the cams and the way it just suddenly builds up on the power at the high revs. It's scary how quickly that comes about. And I found myself in a wall many times in making that video, as people will see. But yeah, it's the riot that I expected it to be. It's mega.
Yeah. What do you think, Andrew? Have you had a chance to drive it yet?
Yeah, no, it's very reminiscent of the old. Well, I'm going to have to be very careful here because we in Europe we got the car in the old Gran Turismo games as the Polyphony 001.
Yes.
Of course, in NTSC regions as it was then, it was the F094S or the F090 something else. Yeah, I probably should read GTpedia sometime. But it's very reminiscent of those kind of cars that we got in the old games. So it's a double throwback in a sense that it takes us back to the older Gran Turismo games, but also to that era of the early 90s before everything changed all of a sudden. But yeah, it's not just one of the best looking; it's one of the best sounding Formula One cars that there's been. And yeah, I've had a little bit of a chance to give it a whirl in the time trial challenge at Monza, which is obviously a perfect location for it. And there is a weekly challenge with it that's starting today, depending on whether it's midnight or not yet, which features some special liveries that Polyphony has created for that race. And there's like a Leighton House one, well, a Leighton House-ish one.
For that.
There's a Jordan-ish one. I think there's an Arrows one. And of course, there's a Ferrari-esque one. And lots of people have also been making their own liveries in the livery editor. Like there was like a Mansell Williams and a Ferrari like that instantly. So yeah, it's a car I think that's going to probably catch the imagination, even though I've never been that much of a fan of having open-wheel Formula cars in a GT game.
I was just to jump in, I was going to say as well, I meant to mention in the video it'd be great if we saw it in the weekly challenges with the roster of, fantasy liveries or, throwback liveries like we'd seen with the Group C's and the JGTC stuff.
Your wish has been granted.
I just hoped so much they would do it, and they've done it straight off the bat. It's mega. And on the subject of liveries, there was a purple one. I can't remember what number it was, but there's a purple one in there that looks like, I mentioned, one of the GT3, the Gran Turismo 3 Polyphony 001s, wasn't there? That was just instant throwback. I could see it in the dealership there and then. And it's great that they still make throwbacks to themselves like that as well, though. But that's what Polyphony does best, I suppose.
Yeah, it maybe it's just because I'm a terrible driver, but I did find it kind of difficult to be quick. I mean, it's hard to drive. And you mentioned, it feels like turbo lag. but it's not. But just the way that engine behaves, I found going through corners, I was never quite sure what gear I was in, and I was driving it in PSVR 2, so I had turned all of the all of the HUD options off, and I know it's displayed down there in the car's indicator little screen, but I wasn't really looking down there because there's so much else going on. You don't really have time to look. But I was like, what gear am I in? Because you can't really tell based off the engine revs, because it's like low, and then all of a sudden it's just really high in that last couple of 100 RPMs there, and that's where all the action is happening.
Yeah, 100%. Sometimes too much action as well. It's just it just catches you off guard so suddenly. But
it's probably the pneumatic valves, because it uses pneumatic valves to spin it to like 15,000. So probably reflecting that.
It's crazy, absolutely crazy, but great crazy. Really, really great crazy.
Yeah. I had to give up on the VR video because I kept spinning out so many times. I started to get a little bit queasy, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this isn't happening. So sorry, guys. You'll just go watch Chaz's video.
To be fair, I wouldn't fare much better in VR, Jordan. I'd put the headset on and fall over. So you got further than me. Don't worry.
Yep. Well, let's move on. So. We've got a old Honda Civic, which is really, I mean, that's kind of one that came out of nowhere. I don't think we were really expecting that. It's a nice choice, though. It's. I mean, I drove it. It's slow. It's one of those cars that's almost so slow you can't even really tell much about its handling characteristics because it's not really going fast enough.
No. And the thing is as well in Gran Turismo 7, and I've noticed it in previous Gran Turismo games as well, that the sense of speed isn't often there. I was going into corners thinking, flipping heck, does it really not handle this well that it can't handle it at this speed? And you look down and you're doing 80 miles an hour. And I was thinking, whoa, it feels like I'm doing about 30. But, you've got the sound of VTEC. It kicks in at about 6,000 RPM in that car. It makes a big growl and gets going-ish. I love an EF. I really do love a Civic EF. A lot of people saw the silhouette and thought that it was going to be the old race car that featured in a number of the other games, of course. I know there was a lot of people who were disappointed when it wasn't, but at the same time, it being a blank canvas and being the road car means that you can do more with it, so there's a bit more versatility there. But I was going to say in my youth then, Jesus. When I was sort of 17, 18, me and a lot of friends all had Japanese cars to modify and play with, and the Civic EF was on a lot of bucket lists for a lot of the lads to get one. A few of them have had them since as well, and you don't see many of them at all. So it was a bit of nostalgia for me to see that come into the game, and I love it. It doesn't go anywhere, and it doesn't handle, and it doesn't even stop from 60 mile an hour. But it's that old school, everything is square characteristic that just brings a smile to your face. And VTEC.
Yeah, you might want to cut that because it doesn't have VTEC.
Does it not? No, it sounds like it does. I could have sworn at 6,000 RPM VTEC kicks in.
No, it's
wow.
Yeah, it's not VTEC because that wasn't introduced until the next engine, but the ZC engine doesn't have it.
Oh my god! Well, that shows how much I know about them, doesn't it? Wow, fair play.
Yeah. So I'll move on with the next bit. We'll just cut the VTEC bit out of the video.
No, I'm leaving it in now. I want to prove to everyone I'm an idiot. It's in there. It's staying. I don't know me Civics.
Well, I mean, you called the F3500 a V8 on your video. It's a V12.
Is it? What do I know, Jordan? Why do you employ me?
It's a question I ask myself every day, Chaz.
Oh dear.
No, that's me. So yeah, it's obviously it's a generation of Civic that we've not actually had before. We've had a slightly older AH or AT bodied Civic, and we've had obviously the EG and the EK onwards throughout all GT games. So I think the EF is a new one for us. That particular specification, it's the extra version of the SI, so it's got fantastic extras like power windows and an optional sunroof and optional ABS. But it's one of those cars that's it throws back to the street racing vibe of Japan, and there's a few mods that you might spot that are kind of tilted towards that. And I think it's the first car that we've got with a car bra as well.
I did not know that. I was gonna. To be fair, I like with certain cars like that. I always like to keep them as I hate the word stock, but as stock as possible, because I like to preserve them a little bit in the game. I know that might be a bit weird because it's only the digital version and not the real thing, but I like keeping them as they are on the outside. So I didn't play with any visual stuff like that with it, but I might actually put one of them on it if I do a modified one, because we all used to have them as well. We all had them.
You are the Barry boy.
Oh, I am, yeah.
Well, moving on to another classic that I know all of your lads, Chaz, are certainly big fans of, is the Toyota CHR.
Oh, can't get enough of it. Fantastic car. Best one of the update. I got in that thing and I was absolutely flying around Autopolis. I'm pretty sure I held the world record there for a few minutes. Unbelievable bit of kit. It has an incredible ability to be the most boring thing to drive I've ever found in a racing game. And I have no end of hatred for the hybrid engines that Toyota have, where they rev their nads off and there's no correlation between the revs and the speed it is doing. I get that it's probably a tick box for polyphony to shake hands with Toyota or something. I don't know. But I don't see a purpose for it other than just to be like, look at what they sell. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't get that, but I'm not as in touch with the marketing side of it, and I don't understand that as much. So maybe there's just a box there to tick, like I said.
It is literally just some car, but it does reflect the real one fairly well. I've drove one many years ago, but yeah, it's basically because it's got the CVT box. So as the engine speed increases, the road speed doesn't, because they're going to keep the engine in its kind of like a sweet spot for power or efficiency, depending on what you want at the time. And the CVT kind of just, it's essentially two cones that rub up and down against each other, and that changes the speed to change the road speed. I mean, it has qualities. I mean, they actually entered one in the Nürburgring 24 hours one year.
Did
Go
they?
figure. So you can gussy your CHR up a little bit to look like a Nürburgring random vehicle.
Is it still going?
Is it still? Yes, it hasn't finished yet. It's the Nürburgring 24 years. But yeah, the one thing I was hoping for with it, because I mean, as soon as I found out it was coming, it was like, well, it's got a 1.2 hybrid or 1.2 turbo or a 1.8 hybrid. You know, the best you can hope for is 140 horsepower. So the thing I was hoping for was an engine swap, because it would be perfect for a GR Yaris or a GR Corolla engine swap.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it would.
Would it?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. I'm going to side with Andrew on that. I think so. Yeah, I think that would be an interesting sleeper.
Corolla and the CHR are basically the same car underneath, and the back of the GR Yaris is also the same car. The GR Yaris uses a kind of a hybrid platform where the front end is a Yaris and the back end is the C architecture, which is the Prius, the Corolla, and the CHR. So yeah, GR Yaris or GR Corolla engine swap for it, I think would be perfect. And then make you build it up to look like your Nürburgring 24-hour race car and you were away. But it hasn't happened. So hopefully next update.
I would just love to know the decision process for including this thing in GT7. Yeah. I would pay money to find out exactly why that car is in GT7. I'm a big fan of slow cars in Gran Turismo. Don't anybody get me wrong. Like that is the bread and butter of the game. That's why 100%. I originally fell in love with Gran Turismo. But the CHR, that's a choice. That's a choice. Yep. But as you mentioned, the transmission, I think, is what makes this car so, I guess, unique in the game. But it's such a strange thing to drive. I was actually, I kind of figured out a cheat. I mean, it's not really a cheat, but I would just like keep the accelerator floored and just tap the brakes, and that kept the engine revs up. And so you didn't have to wait, because like you go into a turn, as soon as you lift off the accelerator, the engine revs drop to like idle basically, and then you just like kind of coast through the turn, and you're like, okay, I want to accelerate out of the turn, and you give it gas and the engine revs up and you don't go anywhere, and then all of a sudden, oh, here we go, we've got some speed. And it's like, how do I even drive this thing? This is crazy. So I was like, okay, if I just stay on the accelerator and just use the throttle, it's going so slow that you can just kind of basically drive the car with the brake to get it to rotate. So
it's strange because it goes against everything you've ever learned about driving a car quickly around a racetrack, and listening out for the engine note to match the speed with gives you another indicator as to how quickly you're going. With that thing, you just floor it, and it's like someone's just kept the clutch in. It's like someone's in the back with a broomstick just prodding the clutch in. This will teach you. It's just the weirdest experience. And it's funny because in the past, on my travels of motorsport commentary, getting taxis and stuff to airports and things, the amount of Priuses I've been in, and I've thought, what are you doing here? Like the driver next to me thinking, have you got your clutch down or something? Why is it revving like mad and going nowhere? Now I get it. Like for years I've wondered why. Gran Turismo's always been good at showing different technologies and, being able to simulate many different types of drivetrain in their games. And it's another example of one that, they've matched well to the real world, as is the fourth car on the list as well.
Yes, the Hyundai IONIQ 5N. So Chaz, you kind of like this, didn't you?
We had different opinions on this straight off the bat, didn't we?
Yes.
I described it as a ridiculously overpowered hatchback that sometimes pretended to be a rear-wheel drive GT car, only when it wanted to, because it felt like, you had to put all the lock on in the world to get it to go around corners, because for a car that obviously, has a very low center of gravity, it's very flat and stiff feeling, despite having a little bit of roll. It contradicts itself in so many ways. But then I quite like the idea that it gives you artificial noise. Part of me wants to hate that, but I like the artificial sort of vroom noise that you get out of it. And it just fires you down a straight. I drove all of them at Autopolis just to have a bit of a controlled environment. And to find that I looked down and suddenly was doing 150 miles an hour before the end of the straight really shocked me. I knew it was going to be quick, but it was quicker than I expected, even with the lack of speed sensitivity that you get in Gran Turismo. I found it great fun because I expected understeer and then some more understeer, but eventually it sort of went, oh, there's a bit of oversteer just to throw you off. And I thought it was quite good fun considering it's electric, but that's something Hyundai do very well. I adore the i30N. It's no secret by now. But they seem to have the N division seems to just know what fun is, and they go chasing it. And I think the IONIQ 5N is a perfect example of that, with an electric car that people would consider so boring. I hate the original. I cannot stand it. But the 5N is just an absolute riot of an electric car. It's like they've said, yeah, look, we've got the usual concept. Now we're just going to sprinkle it with madness, and there you go, have some fun with it. It's brilliant.
Well, I'm glad you like it.
Someone had to. Come on, it was going to be me, wasn't it?
Someone. Have you driven it, Andrew?
I have. I also quite like it.
Get in.
The main problem with it is one of the fundamental features of the 5N is it has a whole bunch of different weird electronic modes going on. Where, you can select also. There's a specific drift mode that you can use.
I saw it on the
real
dash.
car. Yeah, with a clutch kick feature where you basically pull in both of the paddles to act like a clutch kick so you can drift it.
So cool.
But there's all these sorts of weird features, but they've got it locked into what I assume is the performance mode. So you don't get the virtual simulated 8-speed gearbox that they've got. You've just got the standard, single-speed motor. You don't have the whole stepped simulation. You've got the sound synthesizer on. It's in the, I think it's called the ignition mode. Ironically, one of the modes draws its inspiration from electric vehicle sounds from Gran Turismo.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine that. But the real thing is basically designed to be kind of like an enthusiast's EV. And we've seen recently that Lamborghini has benchmarked it, presumably for an upcoming EV. But in GT, it's kind of just locked into a single mode, so you don't get all of this user interactivity that the real thing has. But no, I quite enjoyed it. It's got the boost feature, which you can basically enable permanently by mapping the overtake button to anything you want. So it has the full 641 horsepower, which is, overpowered. The thing I had with it was, I think it has the longest distance brake zone markers of any car I have ever seen. You have to brake so early. It's like the brake zone inside the Deep Forest tunnel. When you're going up to the hairpin at the top of Deep Forest, the brake zone is inside the tunnel. It's absurd.
I've no shame in admitting that the first time I floored it down the straight at Autopolis, I hit the wall at the end of the straight because I expected it to stop quite well.
Yeah.
I went through the entire gravel trap and hit the end of the wall.
Just
And,
like skimming
yeah.
a stone over the waves.
Oh, yeah, the biggest stone you've ever skimmed, I tell you. It's a hell of a stone, but, you know, it's one of the things you learn when you first drive a car, isn't it? Will it stop? No. Definitely not in this case.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. How did you guys get this thing to stop? Because it is just like nothing happens when you hit the brakes. I can't say I enjoyed it. I did start to come to terms with it. I think the more laps I did with it, the stopping distance, though, it's so long. Like you said, Andrew, it's like you hit the brakes and you're like, yeah, no, that's not even going to be close. No. and so you keep moving the braking point farther and farther back, and eventually it does kind of work out. But yeah, it's I don't know. I didn't really enjoy it. and the car, the sounds, I think, are an interesting thing too, because it's a synthesized version of a synthesized sound.
Yes. Yeah.
So
it's like when you turn the headlights on your car in Gran Turismo, you're actually using real electricity.
It's exactly the same thing. Yeah, exactly the same thing. But an interesting, I think it's good that the car came to Chaz.
That's just absolutely melted my head. I'm so
true.
Sorry. It's true.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think it's a good car though for Gran Turismo. I feel like it was always going to be added to the game at some point. Of course, it's in Assetto Corsa Evo. And I think that's a car that Hyundai obviously wants to push out to younger buyers and younger car enthusiasts. So it makes perfect sense.
In GT as well, you can make it look like the Pikes Peak Time Attack version.
Yes.
Which, of course, is something that they've referenced in their own marketing material. But we don't have Pikes Peak yet!
No.
Speaking of, where's Apricot Hill?
So many questions. Yeah, the Pikes Peak will always be one of the biggest enigmas, though, for me. I mean, after they sponsored the event, and then you've got so many connections there, and it's just a big black hole. It's a big black hole, and I don't know. We'll see what happens. But speaking of tracks, I think that is something. I mean, we say it every time we get an update without a track.
Every time we do a podcast.
Yeah, we sound like a broken record at this point. But yeah, there's no new tracks in this update. Really, we just get some new Sophie races, and we've got more engine swaps, new photoscapes, and new physics, new driving physics, which are, I don't know. I felt like it was not a good change for me using the Fanatec GTDD Extreme. I'm not really happy. Immediately I was like, whoa, I thought it was the cars at first, but then I'm like, no, wait, I think this is actually a physics thing, because I jumped in straight away and started driving the new cars. But yeah, I don't know. It feels a little bit, I'm not sure what the word to use is. On the DD Extreme, the force feedback, I think, has been modified a little bit, because you go in to turn the wheel and it's like an on-off switch with the higher frequency vibrations. So you go on and you're turning the wheel, and then all of a sudden it's like, and it's vibrating. And then as soon as you stop, I guess, sliding the wheels or slipping the tires, it goes away. So it's turned off, which doesn't feel very natural. And that was always there to a point, but then it kind of went away with recent updates, and now it seems to be back. So
well,
I'm not a huge fan of it.
There's been a steering geometry change for wheel controllers as well, so that might double up on it. But I mean, I could have done with a physics change yesterday, or whenever we're recording this Wednesday, because there was a Nations Cup race at Road America, yes. Sorry, Road Atlanta, not Road America. Why do I always say that? Road Atlanta.
I always do that.
Yeah, in the Suzuki Cappuccinos, and it was a replica of a race that was about 6 months ago, which I did it okay in. But under the physics, just before they changed it with the weird suspension and tyre reaction to bumps, I found a whole bunch of ways of crashing at that circuit that I've never discovered before. So yeah, I could have done with that a day earlier, but it's it's been okay on controller. As I said, I often say that I'm quite too lazy to go over onto the wheel. On the controller, it seems fine.
I found one or two issues because, as often happens when I'm doing an update video or recording any content with it, if I jump on for a little bit while I'm editing and so on, I'll still have the PS5 on. I'll be chatting away with some friends and so on Discord while I'm editing and putting everything together, and then I'll get talking to them about it, end up showing them a car that I've built and so on. And I was trying to drive one of my beloved RX-7s, which I put the 787B engine in, and all of a sudden, after that felt like an absolute track day time attack monster for so long, I've always taken the mick a little bit of how when you're on the brakes, suddenly coming off the brakes, the car then begins to turn really aggressively. I found that has been amplified tenfold in some of the certain cars that I've done engine swaps to and modified quite heavily. With typical road cars, it was all right, but anything heavily modified or right on the limit of adhesion, as soon as you have any sort of sudden lift off the brakes or even sudden application of the brakes, any attempt at trail braking, it seems to have amplified the oversteer in moments like that for me. That's what I found straight off the bat anyway. I don't know whether that's just me because of getting used to the new cars or what, but yeah, suddenly jumping back into them, they felt alien to me, which was really, really quite strange and very upsetting because I spent a lot of time on them.
Yeah, it's always a little bit strange, a give and take, I think, with these physics updates, because you have some people with some wheels or controller users that are, really looking for a new change and an update. And then you have other people that really come to terms and get comfortable with the physics in their current state, and then you change it. And so, everybody kind of has their own opinions on these things. It makes it really hard if you're doing like a review or something because it's a completely moving target. And I don't think I would have said a lot of the same things that I said about the DD Extreme in my review with the physics in their current state. But who knows? It may change again next month. So it's kind of a moving target. I mean, all those things about the wheel itself are still true, the inherent characteristics about it. But
have you got full force yet?
Yeah.
No. Very funny.
What do you think?
Yeah, what's that? What's that? Yeah. No sign of it. No sign, which is getting ridiculous at this point. But I digress.
We'll keep reminding him. Reminding him, everyone. Don't worry. If I can say it.
Yeah. Without giving too much away, I think the next update will probably have a lot to talk about, but we'll just have to leave it at that.
What does he know? What?
We will just have to leave it at that, and that's probably a good place to end the video. So we will see all of you guys next time. Let us know what you think about the cars in this update in the comments or in our forums. I think there's going to be a lot of different opinions across the board on this. So we will see you guys next time.